Okay, last thing we're going to talk about in this particular assignment are these winds called the trade winds. And for the purpose of this, we need to do just a super quick review of wind forces. All right, so there are three forces that affect the wind. There's the pressure gradient force, the Coriolis force, and friction. The pressure gradient force moves winds from high to low. So based on that, what direction should the winds be blowing in on this map? Should they be blowing towards the equator or away from the equator? Good job! You said towards the equator. If you didn't, that's okay. I just said it, so towards the equator. So what I actually want you to do on this map is actually draw arrows that start at the high pressures at 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south, and then make their way towards the equator. Now that's not everything I want you to do though. That's just only if we talk about the pressure gradient force. But we also need to talk about the Coriolis force. Now the Coriolis force turns the wind. It changes the wind's direction. So what actually happens is, as air is accelerating from these high pressure systems towards the low pressure, the Coriolis force is going to turn the wind. And in the northern hemisphere, it turns it to the right of its direction. What that means is as the wind is headed towards the low pressure, it's heading downward on the screen. Its right is not your right. If it was heading up, it would turn to your right. But it's heading down. Therefore, it turns this way. Therefore, it turns this way. And then finally, the same is true in the southern hemisphere. The only thing that changes is that in the southern hemisphere, Coriolis force turns the wind to the left of its direction. But since the wind is headed up, since it's headed north, its left happens to be our left in this case. And so what we end up getting is when you put those two things together, and friction does have a little bit of an effect down near the equator. The only thing that we're going to worry about with that is, rather than heading perfectly straight left, oftentimes winds will converge right on the equator. And in fact, we oftentimes call the equator the Intertropical Convergence Zone, or the ITCZ. It's where hurricanes form, actually. But we'll talk about that in another investigation. So this is really all I want you to be able to do and understand in this particular component of the investigation. And that's really it for Investigation 8A.